Yeah.
So if I want to be a moderator on clients. Well, figure it out. When we get a shot to the audience, and the shots to the audience. Yeah, maybe over here. You have a tripod? Yeah, right here. I like the shot. It's like not out of the way, but I can get a shot of the crowd. Yeah. And even better, the chargers are over here if I need to charge my stuff. Okay. Yeah. And then for audience questions. That might be better.
Mic check.
Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah, human mics. We have a human mic stand. Don't worry about the mic stand. Oh, yeah. TikTok down here, and down in a minute. One thing I forgot. Maybe we're going till midnight. How do I get that?
Let me walk you through there. Pardon me.
Bobby, you're. I was thinking about this.
Anybody who's standing in front of the screen be about here, if you're right here, or your phone. So yeah, so here, there's also a dark spot in between here. People love to stand like this, right in the dark spot. Good spot.
And microphone, I mean, this is the moderator.
So that person I think over there, that's what's actually going on too.
Yeah, that's what I will. Yeah. So I wanted this. Still in the.
Yeah, just make sure I get it up right.
Hi. See ya. And then so. Oh, yeah. I actually. Yeah, you try to get the right phone or
one thing I need to know,
you're gonna have a room so aggregates, but we run as much as we can to keep it civil, to keep it within our. So when people grab it, we're all gonna be.
So I can also route the camera to the monitor out there. Which I have camera battery charger. So what I got is, let me grab it. I got this. In case the battery dies, I got a backup. Oh, yeah, like, so far, so good. Yeah, I was actually this. There's a what's all back here. So is there, you can eat this one on the other side. We'll find you. You're up. Oh, yeah. Push your, can't push your way through. Basically, Alderman, just Alderman, I'm gonna do that right after Marcy gets her, and I'll live that out. Okay. So I'm gonna have Kevin, seems Kevin come out, he's wearing glasses, sport coat, he'll come to the top of the stairs. Push your way through. I get mine. So, kind of the position, at least what I'd say is that it's happening outside of the boundaries, the whole conversation. It's a conversation, things that are not full, but on support strategies. Support is. It said that they were going to vaccinate by the end of last week. I followed up with them again. Said, yeah, we're trying to get something. He's talking on all of you. So it's correct. He's, I mean, it falls 100% for that.
So we're
Yes.
Okay, sure, yeah, so,
The Zoom is pulled up there.
so do you want me to do Zoom?
I think so.
Okay, do you want us to do anything with the conference item?
No. That's going to be me. Sorry.
My name's Sarah, nice to
Sarah,
meet you.
nice to meet you. Player, pleasure.
Here are a couple of extra copies of the sheet on the show. Okay, we're good setting down that.
Behind myself.
Oh, over the weekend.
Support day.
So you want to go see how it's looking on Zoom?
Yeah, it's gonna be better. But yeah, go ahead and take a look.
Okay.
Make sure that's all good.
Yeah.
And then who are the two people helping hand on this one?
Lara and Claire.
Tell them what to do. So if I turn this on, this will work out there now?
Should, yeah.
All right, so let's go. Okay.
Again, the doors are open.
If I stand out there and do it, would be.
No,
No. Test, test. literally on this side. Everybody. Once you answer the question, your staff or strategy, they can take the question. And while people are. So, yeah.
Why I'm already structured it so that there's a section that they're asking questions.
is largely full. The balcony's filling up as well. So, well, let's get started just a couple of minutes early. We have a lot to get to tonight. And there's a lot of people who did register for questions during the live question and answer session. We are using the lottery system, but our goal is to get to everyone, if time allows, to have a question or a point made, and you will have 3 minutes to do so during that phase of the meeting. So again, good evening. We appreciate your presence here. I'm Second Ward Alderman Brian Hopkins, and this is the 7th major community meeting since this proposal was first unveiled several years ago before the Old Town community. Those 7 meetings counting tonight include a variety of formats, including one meeting that was all virtual, it was on Zoom, one that was all live that we didn't have a Zoom component, and then tonight where we've pretty much thrown everything into the pot. We're doing everything tonight. Live, obviously, you're all here. We are also live streaming on Zoom, and Zoom viewers will be able to participate as well virtually. We also have a question and answer format that will be explained shortly, where questions can be posted on your device, and you can upvote a question that you like on your device in real time, and that will go in progress as we discuss the answers to those questions. Then at the end, we will have, as I mentioned, a live question and answer session where everyone who so desires, who registered, you should have got your 3-digit number. We're using a random lottery to sequence the people, so it didn't give you any advantage if you got here at 5 o'clock to try and get a low number. It's a random order, so the questions will go in sequence. And as I said, we hope to get to everyone who wants to take their 3 minutes of time to either express your support, express your opposition, ask a question, or both, whatever you want to do. So we'll try to get to everyone. We have a hard stop at 8:45. So I do want to thank Latin School and the crew for hosting us and for giving us the time. That should be enough. This meeting is also co-hosted by Old Town Merchants and Residents Association. Marcy Hudis is here, and I'll be introducing her in just a moment. But I do want to mention one thing already. There's no decision that will be made in the immediate aftermath of this meeting. This is an ongoing community process, and while I hope you'll get some valuable information tonight, we already know that the information provided tonight, the changes that Mr. Anderson will discuss since the last time we had a presentation, it won't be enough to call this process complete. And the reason is because we have asked the Department of Transportation, in conjunction with the traffic consultant that Fern Hill has hired, to come up with the traffic improvement and mitigation plan for this neighborhood. They're working on it. It's not done. We were hoping we would have it tonight. They didn't finish it yet. So we will need to have another meeting when that traffic study is completed. We can still discuss traffic tonight. You can still raise your concerns about traffic. But again, until we get that deliverable from the Department of Transportation, this process will remain open, and no decision about either approval or denial for the proposal you're about to hear will be made unless and until we get to that point. And that is ongoing. So with that, I would like to introduce our co-host tonight from the Old Town Merchants and Residents Association, Marcy Hudis. Marcy.
Great, thank you, Alderman. Thank you to the Second Ward office. Thank you to all of you. I'm lucky enough to see a lot of friendly faces out there that I know. So I'm Marcy Hudis. I'm the Executive Director of Old Town Merchants and Residents Association. Now, we are an organization that brings together Old Town stakeholders, businesses, residents, nonprofits, schools, etc. We work to ensure a vibrant and prosperous and safe community. We work with a lot of the other organizations in the Old Town community. We really appreciate that everybody's making the time to be here today. And we know that everybody is here tonight because they care deeply and passionately, as do we. OTMRA is very focused on asking questions and clarifying information at this point. OTMRA has not taken a position at this point. At some point, we will. We have a zoning committee. It's made up of longtime residents, of business owners, some of them multi-generational business owners, property owners, and other stakeholders that carefully consider zoning issues. The committee has carefully crafted some questions based on what we've heard from many of the people here. So at some point tonight, after the developer gives a presentation, we will ask some of those questions, and the intention is to help all of us understand how this proposal would impact the Old Town community. So I have two asks. One is that we all respect each other. People might not necessarily agree all the time. That is completely okay. We also have the suggestion that at the beginning of these sessions, we focus on questions to help everybody better understand the proposal. And with that, I'm going to ask Brian Pelrain to explain a little bit more about how process is going to work tonight.
Good evening. Brian Pelrain with Alderman Hopkins' office. I've spoken with many of you. It's nice to see your faces. Thanks for being here tonight. On your way in, you received this handout. We are going to use this to get some of your comments and your questions up on the screen. And Marcy is then going to, after she asks her questions from OTMRA, after the developer gives his presentation, Marcy will ask those questions, as they rise in popularity. So you'll have the option to click on the best questions and they'll rise to the top, and that's how we'll try to get through as much of this as possible, so as much feedback as possible can be taken and questions answered. Don't worry, there will still also be that live question and answer session that we talked about after that. So we're just trying a bunch of different things tonight to try to get as much feedback and as many questions answered as possible. So with that, I am going to turn it over to the developer, but I think this is pretty self-explanatory. Maybe not. Okay. Well, I am sorry to hear that. Hopefully most of you were able to get into that. If not, well, we might be pivoting then. Our apologies. We were trying something different here, and that's what you get. So we'll see if any of them are, we'll open it up and we'll see if anybody's able to get through and get them in. If not, we'll move right to a live question and answer.
We get the Wi-Fi.
We'll see if there is some Wi-Fi as well that the school can provide for some people to jump on. But some people have been able to get in. Yeah, okay. Just depends if you have cell service, probably for the most part. All right. Well, excuse me. Can you please sit down? This is not your presentation. You'll have time to be heard from. All right. With that, we're going to turn it over to Nick Anderson to give the presentation. If we could please all be respectful, we will get through this evening.
Okay. All right, let's, I know there's a lot of passion in this room, both sides. I just want to reiterate, let's make sure we're respectful to everybody, okay? I'm Nick Anderson with Fern Hill. Thank you for being here tonight. Just quickly pass through these slides. This is, like the Alderman said, this is one stop in a long process that we've all been going through for the last few years. It's not the end of the process. No decisions are being made at this meeting or shortly thereafter. We hope that this brief presentation can give everyone an equal footing for an understanding of the project that's being proposed in its current form. And again, we look forward to the feedback in this room and also in the days and weeks to come following this meeting. This has been an iterative process. This has been a very different process than the typical plan development in Chicago dynamic dealing with the communities. We engaged very early on with the community before we even had a project proposal, and frankly, before all of the parcel owners that are now involved in this plan development had even decided to join our team. So it's worked because there's been so much interaction back from this group, good, bad, indifferent. Just want to put this in perspective and really kind of pay a comment to both the alderman who challenged the community to pick up the paintbrush a few years ago, and then also for hearing that call. In order to go through this process for the last 3 years, the back end for this whole system has been off of this website called Co-Urbanize. They're a national platform, and just to put it in perspective, the amount of energy that this community has put into this process, out of 150 active projects across the country that are on this platform, the Old Town community is number one in terms of total community interaction and feedback. So just a testament to the process that we've run, but also how involved you have all been, and we're happy you're here. That process has led us to make some changes to the project as we've gone through, both in the design, setbacks, the choice of tower location and spacing and massing. And I'll go through this quickly because this is, oops. See that too? I was just none of this is new, but just a quick refresher. This is the rendering from North and Wells, looking to the northeast towards what is currently the Walgreens retail. Traveling to the east along North Avenue, this is the existing condition and the proposed project. This would be the North Avenue facing storefront of Walgreens. Just that same rendering, larger. And again, all of these things are not new, but available on our website as well. From the intersection of North Avenue and LaSalle, looking to the northwest, this is the current Moody Church surface parking lot and what would be the residential front door for the building. And then that same perspective pulled back a little bit further away. Here you see the dedicated parking structure for the Moody Church above the ground floor retail. And of course, the more controversial component of the project, the tower, which we recognize, but here's a rendering and perspective of that from over Lincoln Park, looking back over the History Museum. And just a quick look at the site plan. This is the one currently proposed area of the project, which is sub-area B. This is the middle of the plan development. To the east is sub-area A, which is the Moody Church parcels within the triangle site. And to the west of Wall Street is sub-area C, which is the current Piper's Alley property. So our proposal, what's actually being proposed to be built today is sub-area B, fully contained between Wall Street and LaSalle. Walgreens has elected to, if approved, rebuild a smaller store, but still substantial on a relative basis of 14,000 square feet back on the hard corner. The residential lobby would be mid-block, and then the south east corner of the site would be additional retail. You'll notice on the north side, access off of LaSalle is an off-street porte cochere. This is the only vehicular curb cut for the project, so there's no curb cuts on Wells Street or North Avenue for both pedestrian safety and traffic flow. We'll get into the size of this facility and why it's so important with both deliveries, ride share, and other demands on the public way. So we also want to recognize that there's been some common arguments both for and against the project. We wanted to take a moment just to quickly talk about kind of each of those, at least some data and facts around probably what's driving people's opinions, and just respond to those before we get to public comment. One of the reasons that we've heard for support of the project is a need for change. We're not saying our version of what we think that change is the right one. We think it is, but we know other people disagree with that opinion. But we think that this neighborhood, when you look at surface parking lots, outdated retail, and gas stations, there's clearly a need for something better. The question is just what is that, right? There's also a need for housing that's been expressed, and I actually want to talk to not affordable housing for a second, but just housing in general. And I think what we're seeing in Chicago, so people outside of the industry are aware, is a massive decline in the new construction pipeline of our city. And on a relative basis, if you look around the rest of the country and what's happening, our current construction supply is a tenth of kind of the national average of the other 10 largest major cities. And last week, there was an article that just ran that we have now in Chicago set an all-time record for market rate rents in the city of Chicago. So it's just a simple supply and demand dynamic. We are generating very little supply in the city of Chicago, and that's creating a ton of pressure on rental rates, which is passed on to people's incomes. For affordable housing though, within kind of that subset of housing, there's a very strong need for housing, frankly, on the north side of the city of Chicago. This is data from the Department of Housing, just to keep in perspective. So these are all of the major populated zip codes of the city of Chicago going back over the last 10 years. And so this trend line that you see is the decline of the number of affordable housing units built in the city as the average median income of that neighborhood goes up, right? And intuitively, we know this. It's harder to build affordable housing in more expensive neighborhoods. Land is more scarce. The process is more labored. So it is just part of the pressure cooker of both housing, all housing, and also a subset of that affordable housing, and why there is so much demand and many would call a crisis. We also know that people are supportive of the project because of the benefits to the built environment that are more conducive to a safe environment, less crime, replacing gas stations with faith-based facilities for the church, and removing parking lots and blank walls, right? Just environments that are more conducive to a safe neighborhood. We've also heard that people are a much more macro comment here on the city of Chicago, but there's a lot of concern that homeowners have on the increase in their real estate taxes and the pressure and where the trajectory of the city. We wanted to create a very visceral example for this room specifically. The green line that you see here is actually the real estate taxes of the 3 largest condo buildings surrounding our site. So what you're seeing here is 1660 North LaSalle, James Kilmer Condo Association, and Americana Towers. So going back 20 years, the taxes of those 3 condo associations on a per unit basis has gone up 78%. That's the data. The troubling piece is at the same time, the unfunded pension liabilities of the city of Chicago have actually increased at a greater pace than the real estate taxes have grown. And so we are still in this situation where as homeowners, we still face coming up with a solution of some very real fiscal issues that face our city. And the answer can't be only to increase real estate taxes. There has to be a balanced approach that also includes building more housing and increasing the tax base of the city, in our opinion. Opponents of the site have cited a couple important issues. One is a disagreement on the scale and the density and the appropriateness of the proposal. We wanted to put this in context. And again, we're not saying our opinion is right. We're just providing context. We are proposing a -5 zoning district for our planned development. That's shown in green. All of the other existing -5 zoning districts are also shown around us. So the 3 blocks west of North Avenue until you hit Sedgwick, the 5 blocks south of Wells Street until you hit Schiller, as well as our 2 closest condo associations to the north, all have the -5 zoning today. Shown in orange are actually the existing zoning districts that have greater density than that we're applying for. So a lot of times I know developers are painted as being greedy and trying, to go for every little last piece of economic value. But there's actually more dense zoning districts in the neighborhood and surrounding us than we've applied for. So just want to keep that in context. For height, we certainly understand this as a passionate issue of the neighborhood. We are on a fault line between the lakefront district and the high-rise buildings that have kind of been around us for the better part of 5 decades. And a low-rise district that's not only low-rise, but has one of the most important historic landmark neighborhoods, national historic landmark neighborhoods in the city, which is the Old Town Triangle Association, which is of course very special. But obviously both of these building typology kind of coexist and have for 50 years. Our building height was originally in the low 400s in terms of feet of height, which was the exact same height as our neighbors to our north and to our south in the high-rise district. We elected to increase the setbacks from North Avenue and make a thinner tower. And so the plan development application we filed increased in height, but not in density or mass. but it was really to just create a thinner site, to be more sensitive to views with a thinner tower and be further away from Wall Street. And then people have expressed concern about the zoning change, and I see the signs. The one argument to make about a zoning change is that, yes, it's asking for more, but it's coming with more control because of that ask through the city. So you know that with this zoning ask comes oversight from city council, from the alderman's office, from the plan commission, and from all of the city departmental staff, including planning, housing, and transportation. So it is very much a process to vet. Our specific zoning ask is shown in green here on the bar. This graph represents all of the zoning districts and the corresponding densities in the city of Chicago. So there are certainly greater zoning districts. There are certainly less zoning districts. So there's not a right answer, right? And there is a broad range. And I think that's what makes this conversation so difficult in a lot of ways, is because there isn't a right answer. And then on traffic, again, we know that the neighborhood is concerned with much more broader macro issues of traffic that exist today, irrespective of this project being built or not. We know the concerns around, the right-hand turns and the length of traffic from LaSalle onto North Avenue and through Wells Street. But the one point we'd like to make in terms of the one thing that is in our control on our site is what we do within the borders of our property. By comparison, again, just to put this in perspective, the James Kilmer Condo Association across the street from us, as well as 1660 North of South, both of these condo associations, roughly 500 to 520 units, both of them have roughly 8,000 to 9,000 square foot or cashier or vehicle circulation areas, either in the front or behind the buildings. On a per unit basis, our back of house area that you saw on the site plan is actually 25% larger than both of these existing buildings. Again, not saying because it's larger, it's right, and we're right, but just pointing that, point of comparison that we have made a concerted effort to the extent we do control, things within our site. Obviously, this is the best option we think to help mitigate our traffic impact back in the public way. And then lastly, incompatibility with the neighborhood is a very common thing that we've heard, words like character, charm. And we certainly understand that there's a large contingency within the neighborhood that lives within the historic Old Town Triangle District in these beautiful homes. We also know that, the neighborhood is full of diverse other uses, like longstanding religious institutions, the lifestyle and commercial corridor along Wells Street, and of course, the existing high-rise buildings that are in the Lakefront District. And so we feel like the neighborhood is a very diverse mix of a lot of different types of building typologies. All of these can be true. And we think this diversity of kind of building typology actually makes for a better neighborhood. Interestingly, our project sort of has a combination of all four of these types of uses between the low 4-story bustle on Wells Street that's made to match the Corcoran's and Wells on Wells scale, the high-rise residential in the middle, the Moody Church parking facility on the east, and then at the base, retail on both corners. And so we're somewhat of a mix of all of these elements of the community. So that's it. I hope it was quick enough. I know no one wanted to hear from me in this room, so thank you for bearing with me. So what we'll do now, Marcy, I'll invite her back up, and she has some questions to go through and roll.
Great, thank you. Yeah, if you could pull that up.
What's disrespectful is anyone putting their sign on stage who hasn't been told to put it there.
Everyone's opinion here matters, not just yours.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So what I have here is. Okay, thank you. So as mentioned, OTMRA, Old Town Merchants and Residents Association, yes, that is a mouthful. Many of our members are here tonight. Many of our zoning committee members are here tonight. Our zoning committee worked very hard to craft some questions that they see as crucial to understanding this development proposal and how it relates to Old Town. So thank you for that. The intention is to help the community gather information. We know that our list cannot preempt all the questions that are out there, and there'll be the opportunity for the community to ask questions afterwards. So let's get started with these questions. So for starters, who is the developer and what is their experience? Is the purchase of any of the parcels that will be included in the proposed and revised plan development contingent on the zoning change request?
This work? Okay. So I'm the developer. Fern Hill is my company. I started it in 2018. We're a Chicago-based developer. We only focus on this city just because it's our backyard. Before starting our company, I worked at another large development firm called Related for about 10 years. So I ran projects for that company, all again Chicago-based. And some of the more well-known projects that I led when I was there include what is now the recasted Spire site, One Bennett Park in Streeterville, 500 Lakeshore Drive right next door, 3 projects in the South Loop, and 111 West Wacker, which is at Clark and Wacker. That was the stalled Shangri-La Tower in the downturn. So I've spent my entire development career here in the city of Chicago specifically, and that's my experience. In terms of, are there other parcels that will be owned or can purchase that are contingent on the zoning? The short answer is yes. This plan development is a collection of multiple parcel owners, including the Piper's Alley, Walgreens, the Moody Church, and properties we own, which includes the 2 gas stations. Following plan development approval, we wouldn't start construction unless we had fee title to all of the real estate. And so we have a purchase option with Walgreens specifically, so that all of that land would be owned by the company and the investors financing that construction. The intention long-term for east of LaSalle is for the Moody Church to have fee title to its entire triangle of properties that are comprised of sub-area A. And there is really no change or any transaction of any kind related to the Piper's Alley parcel. They're simply involved as a matter of being in the current plan development 89 from the 1970s with Walgreens. So inclusion of Walgreens into the project, although we would own that site in the future, there's no transaction development agreement or anything related to, or purchase option or anything related to Piper's Alley. So, but for being in the PD, Piper's Alley is effectively a standalone. So hope that answered the question.
Okay, so the second question, and I think this is probably directed initially at the alderman, is what does the current zoning allow to be built? This might be a joint question.
So the existing zoning, again, there's a few parcels involved, and I'll work from west to east. Piper's Alley and Walgreens are currently in plan development 89. That's how old it is. It's, you know, a double digit number. That they have their own, density, prescribed uses, in that plan development. It was originally a 5.5 FAR with 285 units in 1972. And then 2 years later, it was amended and reduced to a 2.2 FAR. And it's kind of stayed in that form with minor amendments ever since. So that's that property or those properties. The Moody Church surface parking lots, and their current property, and both of the gas stations, I believe, are B3. And then there is a small single-family home parcel directly north of the Moody Church's parking lot. That's the single-family home. That's actually, which will remain, it's a part of the plan development process, but there's no change to that parcel and the building will remain. But that's an RM5 zoning. So all of these different zonings somewhat get reset when they all join the plan development. But it's good perspective. They all have different zoning, but they would all consolidate under a B-5 in our proposal.
Now, why would they all consolidate under the same zoning? Is that a requirement? Because they're not currently.
Yeah, so a plan development application in the city of Chicago must start from the same base zoning. You can't have multiple zoning classifications within a plan development. So you kind of rezone everything to a baseline, and you get to pick what that baseline is as part of, well, you don't get to pick, you get to propose what you think that baseline is. And then from there, because there are different sub areas in the plan development, that's why a PD allows greater flexibility for planning in terms of massing location, because you can move, instead of building 4 or 5 towers each on the individual sites, you can apply to consolidate those development rights to a single project. But all of that is done under the same underlying zoning density. You know, there's a, you know, might be a 2 or 3 story building on the Moody Church side of LaSalle. And that's made possible because all of those unused development rights have basically been moved to sub area B in this case, which creates a bigger tower on sub area B. But the flip side is it creates a very low rise structure, economically possible on the east side on sub area A.
Would Fern Hill definitely be the developer building the tower, or is there a chance that the rights could be sold after potential zoning change approval?
So we intend to develop the project all the way through. There's no conversations, discussions, plans with any other development firm or investor for us to sell, flip, assign any rights to the project. So certainly have put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this process, and hope we're able to see it all the way through. With the caveat, is anything possible? Absolutely. Something could happen in the future, and maybe we sell for some reason. So I don't want to misrepresent or lie. Like, anything is possible, but we have absolutely no intention to do that, and have every intention of seeing the project all the way through.
This is a long question. I think that a lot of this was answered already, but I'll ask it, and we'll see if any portion of it wasn't. Will the traffic study be released to the city zoning committee and public before any recommendations are made by the alderman and zoning committee? Will CDOT, IDOT have a plan to implement recommendations to mitigate traffic before the city zoning committee makes a recommendation? And then the last part of it is, does the traffic study or will it explain the impact of the proposed curb cuts on the neighborhood?
So as the alderman said at the beginning, we're still awaiting feedback and direction and some ideas and resources to be deployed by the Department of Transportation for us. As many of you have seen in prior presentations, there was a phase of our project where we were very proactive in suggesting our own improvements, looking and studying at the project. And Brenda is with KLOA, our traffic engineer, who is working and helping the Department of Transportation in those studies. Ultimately, it's out of, I have no right to tell CDOT what to do with the public ways of Chicago streets or changes. So we're here to support the aldermen, CDOT, ideas from the community. We have a vested interest in making traffic as good as it possibly can be and fixing the conditions. So if there's any idea or something to do, we're all in and fully support that. But again, it's totally out of our control. And yeah, we'll support the Department of Transportation, any ideas that they want to deploy. But ball's in their court, and we hope that they can come up with some great solutions.
Brendan doesn't have anything to add to that.
Nothing other than our study is continually evolving with these meetings, with the different changes that are coming to the site plan. And our study does address the impacts of the proposed access drives on the area and what that traffic does. But we also highlight how the development is doing a lot of positive things to minimize their traffic impacts where they can, given that we are working with CDOT on the regional issues while also focusing on how this development can contain its traffic on site and be the best neighbor that can be in terms of traffic.
For those of you who have never participated in a community review process for a major development where traffic is a concern, let me just tell you how it normally goes. The neighborhood hears about the proposal. The first thing that comes to their mind is its potential impact on traffic. They go to the developer and they say, we don't want to entertain this because we know it's going to cause even worse traffic than we already have. The developer responds by hiring a traffic consultant. The traffic consultant does two things. Basically an analysis of the existing conditions, which confirms what everybody already knows. There's too many cars, not enough parking spaces, traffic is bad. Then concludes that this development won't change anything, nothing to see here, move along. The Department of Transportation then gets the consultant's report and basically verifies its accuracy in terms of the methodology used to do the count, the drawings, the design. Because they're all professional traffic engineers, of course, they do the job they're supposed to do, and there's no fundamental flaws. But the conclusion that traffic is really not an issue, so everybody just stop talking about it, really doesn't resonate with people. And people don't believe it, they don't accept it, and they know that the traffic consultant is paid by the developer, so they kind of think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion what the results of that study were going to be. We are not doing that with this project, period. I've been through this process enough with different development proposals that I simply wasn't going to accept that for two reasons. Number one, as you all know, the existing traffic conditions in this area, particularly around North and LaSalle and the lakefront on Clark Street in the morning, as Nick said, even without this development proposal, it's unacceptable. And I wanted to leverage this project to get answers from the Department of Transportation. So the traffic consultant has done the job that I mentioned. They've done the analysis, they've done the counts, they have the data. CDOT also has the data. That doesn't get us anywhere near where we need to be in terms of solutions. We need to have better traffic management, better traffic flow. We also need to improve the safety of pedestrians, dog walkers, everybody who tries to cross Clark Street in the morning, going to the park or going to the farmer's market on Wednesday and on Saturday. It's currently an untenable, unsafe condition for pedestrians, for cyclists, for walkers trying to cross at North Avenue, and for traffic. So we need answers. We need answers from the Department of Transportation. I've informed the mayor that this process is underway. He has told the Department of Transportation through their commissioner, he expects to see a traffic mitigation and safety improvement plan for this development. Now, again, we need that even without this, but if we can combine the two, it opens up additional funding sources to pay for some of the traffic improvements that we're going to need. So we're doing something different on this proposal. And the reason we're doing it is because if this proposal can help us deliver those solutions that we need, it gets us closer to where some of the people in this room who may not be supportive of this idea right now may change their mind and become supportive of it. if we can show that it makes things better instead of worse. So that's a long answer to the fact that we simply don't have the proposal from CDOT before us tonight. My first call tomorrow will be to the commissioner of CDOT because he knew this meeting, he had a deadline, and they didn't meet it. As I said, they assure us they're working on it. They've got a lot of other things they're doing over there. It's a very busy department right now, so I'm trying to have a little patience with them. This process isn't through, and it won't be through until we get that report from CDOT, and they have the opportunity to work with the traffic engineers that Fern Hill has hired.
Thank you, Alderman. This question is regarding FAR. Will there be any remaining FAR on any of the parcels involved in this plan development after the proposed Fern Hill Tower is built? If so, how could that FAR be used in the future? Please be specific and address each parcel, including Piper's Alley. And the second part is, once a plan development is approved, what is the process for included parcels applying for and receiving zoning and development modifications?
Okay. My zoning council is here too, so if I say something wrong, say like our code word or something. Okay, so I'll try to be succinct. I'll start from, again, west to east. So the entire plan development is proposed as a -5, right? So, the Piper's Alley parcel would be zoned as a -5. That's in terms of FAR, square footage density, that's an increase. I'll come back to that. The middle, because there's more to development rights in the second part of the question that have to do with approved uses and unit count. Sub-area B, which is the tower in the middle that we're proposing in the ground floor retail, that we're at a 5. Right, overall, but we've transferred some of the FAR from the Moody Church over. So we're technically around an 11 in terms of density. And then when you go, and there's nothing left over, that's it. And then when you go to the Moody Church triangular parcel, even though we're all at a 5, they reduce their density. They're closer to a 2. And they are reserving additional FAR for both the gas station parcels in the future for them to have expanded church facilities on those parcels. That would be roughly 50 to 55 feet, which is the same height as the existing administration and education space building that they built maybe 10 years ago or so. So that's the air rights, 5, 11, and 2 averages to a 5. In terms of what they're allowed to build in the future, in addition to just density, right, there's also other things in the plan development like approved uses, unit count. And so to dispel any other rumors, there is no unit count being approved on any of the sub areas except unit B. So that's, regardless, if you had density to the moon, there's no resident as well. The second piece of that is unit count. And so the plan development, again, only has the 500 units we're proposing on sub-area B. In the future, if any of the parcel owners in the plan development would like to change or amend the plan development to seek different entitlement processes, that would require an amendment. And if it's a major change, like things like height, massing, setbacks, unit count, the things we care about, right, that are more of the major decisions, that triggers an amendment, a formal amendment to the PD application that would have to be resubmitted to City Council, and effectively it triggers the exact same public type process that a brand new PD would trigger. Even though it's an amendment, this is not a backdoor. There's no secret workaround that's happening here. So if there's any project in the future that Moody wants to do differently, that Piper's Alley wants to do differently, and they're changing anything in the plan development, again, that relates to height, setback, density, unit count, all of those would trigger a plan development review that would, again, run through the Alderman's office, trigger community meetings, city departmental review, plan commission review, zoning committee review, city council review. So hopefully that answers the question.
Would that apply to commercial being built up at Piper's Alley too? Could they go any higher with that?
So the height of the 3 sub areas is In A and C, which is again, Moody and Piper's Alley, the height in the plan developments is limited to the height of existing structures. So if they want to go back and increase the height, and build something taller than it's already there, it triggers an amendment to the plan development.
Thank you. What is the plan to mitigate disruption to traffic during potential construction? Will any lanes be blocked off? Will there be a canopy? How could a construction plan be coordinated with neighbor businesses and residents to facilitate commercial needs and community access to public resources?
Yeah, this is an easy one. We will submit, once we select a general contractor, they'll put together a construction logistics plan that will go directly to the alderman's office and to the city departments. It'll be reviewed. That will also include not only construction logistics, canopy locations, but it'll also include operating rules, hours of operations, noise requirements, start and stop work times, and also requirements to, be updating and most likely have probably community contacts where if people have issues with something going on the site, they have a number, they know who to call. Very customary things that good general contractors do this every day, very customary, but we would fully commit to that. We know construction is a nuisance and it is annoying. So it's, the best we can do. But there will be a formal plan submitted and reviewed by the alderman's office.
Without any setbacks along North Avenue, there will be a potential impact on the adjacent sidewalks, buildings, roadways from falling ice. What is the plan to minimize or eliminate the possibility of falling ice from the building, including potential mechanical mitigation?
Like a heat tracer, something. I mean, that's a very technical question. I'm not an architect, so it's something I could have them. I just don't want to misspeak and kind of give you something off the cuff, but yeah, I don't know. It's just a common problem. I mean, ice melt happens. We can certainly create permanent canopies over the right of way, or kind of extend next to Walgreens along North Avenue if we wanted to create somewhat of a covered, buffer or canopy, something like that. That's an architectural detail that we could study. It also goes to kind of the profile or the depth of the facade, cover. If deeper facades that read less glassy, right? Those are deeper. That increases the likelihood of ice buildup. So it's somewhat of a push and pull between how anti-glass you want the building to read versus how deep that profile is, which could collect glass, or could collect ice. That's a non-answer, but that's my answer.
And why not locate the tower at the corner of North and LaSalle, where it will have less of an impact on the look and feel of the main commercial corridor of Old Town?
That's a really good question. So there are no perfect solutions, right? In a development like this, it's kind of a series of choices. So I guess the best way for me to answer, and of course we've studied that, and I think in a previous community presentation in January, we actually showed multiple massings where the tower was shaped differently, and one of the options was actually moving the tower to North Avenue. From an architectural perspective, our personal opinion is that moving it to LaSalle somewhat exposes the parking podium that's being built at the base for the residential residents and the Moody Church. Having the tower kind of oriented in the middle of the site, and having that architecture of the facade come all the way to the street breaks up that podium so it reads as three different elements. You have the 4-story structure on Wells Street, you have the tower that comes in front of it, and then you have the 6-story structure facing LaSalle. So architecturally, visually, that's the benefit that's lost by pulling the tower all the way over. It becomes kind of that traditional tower, big parking podium. The architecture solution would have to be totally different. Because no one wants to see a building and think, in the words of someone from the planning department, the building says, "Come park here." Nobody kind of wants that. From a traffic perspective, and just site planning, if you can picture the site plan that we showed, the whole east and northeast area of the site is a huge port cochere vehicular circulation area to both, provide space for ride share, pickups and drop offs, Amazon delivery trucks, right? That's possible because the tower, the core, all the caissons, they're falling over the footprint of Walgreens. If you shift the tower to the east, again, it's possible, it's absolutely possible, but you lose the flexibility of that area to be that traffic mitigation offsite solution. So, yeah, absolutely, it's possible to move it all the way to LaSalle, but there's some kind of, there's upside and downside to that. So again, not a right answer, just a series of choices.
Why can't this development have more open space at ground level? Can open space be added?
So I think it actually ties to the last answer. So about a third of the site actually is open space. It may not read that way. The port cochere area off the back and on the north part of the site, that's several thousand square feet. The southwest corner of the site where Walgreens currently is, there's a 8-foot setback of the public way, 40 feet in on the corner. And then in front of the residential building, there's a 12-foot setback from the current sidewalk public way. So that's a 24-foot deep sidewalk that will be there, and that extends all the way to the corner of North and Wells. So we've kind of pulled back the corners of the building in public way, plus the big area off the back. When you add those three sections together, it's over 10,000 square feet, and it's a 34,000 square foot site. So there is public open space, but it becomes, again, a trade-off of, is it more important for us to dedicate the area for traffic mitigation or for open space? And we feel like we've tried to dedicate more of the space towards getting cars off the street, getting ride share and Amazon trucks off the street. But so again, series of choices. I know I sound like a broken record.
A question about parking. We're getting close to the end here of the questions. As the Moody parking area is planned for their sole use, could Moody rent out their 300 parking spaces during times they are not using them? If so, could a restrictive covenant regulate usage that best accommodates the neighborhood needs?
Certainly, I'm not going to speak for the Moody Church. What I would say is it's a facility that is funded by them with their own capital. It's for their members. They have uses for parking throughout the week. Obviously, Sundays and Wednesdays are bigger days for them. But as, again, a nonprofit, it's their space. They've built it. Again, I wouldn't want to impose a restricted covenant on how they could use their private parking facility for their members. That to me feels like an overreach, but they're here a part of this conversation too. This is probably the first community meeting we actually haven't had in the Moody Church itself. So they're incredibly active, supportive members of this community. I think they're always open to having a conversation, but certainly wouldn't want to speak for them. But my gut says if their members raise the money to build this facility for themselves, they would probably like to run it because there's a need that they have.
Thank you. And this is the last question coming from us. Have dates been scheduled for the city public hearings, including the Plan Commission hearing, Committee on Zoning hearing, and City Council discussion?
That one's directed to me. As I said previously, I was somewhat optimistic a couple of weeks ago that we would actually have the proposal from the Department of Transportation for the traffic mitigation and safety plan tonight. If that had occurred, I probably could have answered this question a little bit more definitively. Without it, no. We're keeping this process open. until such time as we have all these questions answered. So all I can tell you is I'm not going to artificially rush this along. I don't want to prolong it either. We'd all like to get to a conclusion, and I know a lot of people have made up their minds, either yes or no, and they're not going to change their minds. So for you folks, like, you want to get this done and you want the answer that you want. But I just can't promise you that right now. You know, there's still too many questions that remain unanswered. And up until that time, you know, I reserve the right to continue to defer this. It has been submitted for the staff review to Department of Planning and the Planning Commission. And that's fine because the professionals there, the architects, the urban planners, the designers, they need sufficient time to go over all the details of this. And they're doing their jobs right now. I have no problem with that. But when it comes to a time frame for approval for my colleagues on the zoning committee to vote on this, we are not there yet. And I can't even commit to a date when we will be until we get these other reports that we're waiting for.
Okay, thank you, Alderman. So thank you, Alderman. Thank you, Nick. I think we're ready. We've taken enough time asking questions. We hope that these questions were helpful for all of you. And I think now is when are we going to be able to try the Q&A? Good.
All right, it seems like at least some people have access on their phones. I apologize that not maybe everybody does, but we're gonna go forward with this part of the meeting. We might shorten it a little bit and get to some more live Q&A after that. So we're just gonna pull that up real quick.
Live Q&A. That's why we're here to talk.
Yes, there will be live Q&A after this. Yes. If you registered at the table, we'll call numbers and we'll do that after this portion.
We only have till 8:30.
Okay, so the way this works, all of you are voting on these questions. So the questions that are interesting to most people have bubbled up to the top. So we'll start with this one that 41 people have asked to have answered. How much property tax revenue is this projected to raise annually for the city of Chicago?
So just assuming 500 units and roughly 5,000 per unit real estate tax bill, it would be 2.5 million per year in real estate tax revenue.
Okay, now 35 people are asking, why were previous generations of this city allowed to build and we're stopping now?
It's a rhetorical question.
Let me just respond to that. The first year that I was alderman in the city of Chicago, we had a record number of sky cranes in the air, building things in our city, not just my work, but all across the city, a record number. We currently have a record now, the opposite. We have almost none. A lot of that's driven by the economy. Some of that is the fact that we still haven't fully recovered from the post-pandemic era. But as Nick mentioned, you know, it's starting to show up in the housing inventory, and that's not a healthy thing. A city needs to grow. A city needs to continue to thrive and be vibrant and be a choice. If people want to move here and people want to live here, and young college graduates from Big Ten universities around the Midwest want to come to Chicago and get their first apartment, that is a good thing, folks. That is a good thing for the city as a whole. And so again, that's part of my job to try and balance that out. You know, if this proposal were suggested in, you know, 2 wards away, I think most people in this room would probably be like, yeah, fine, that's great. We're building buildings in the city of Chicago. So it's a balance between the collective interests of the economic health of the city as a whole and the community interests of people who are longtime residents, stakeholders, and have a legitimate concern about something that's literally going to be in their backyard. So part of what we're trying to do is balance that out. But I think the question is predicated on what we've all observed recently, and that is construction and new housing starts in the city of Chicago are at disturbingly low numbers, and that has to change.
It looks like the next question that 35 people, 35 of you, one answered, is what improvements to sidewalks, bike lanes, and buses around this development will be made to improve traffic in the area? So what are the improvements that will be made to improve traffic in the area?
Yeah, so in addition to the ongoing conversations we're having with CDOT, some improvements that Nick had referred to is offsetting the building off of the sidewalk, which enhances the width of that public right of way on North Avenue. Pulling the building back at the corner of Walgreens, creating more area for pedestrians to gather at Wells and North Avenue. We've identified that all these intersections in our study area have high visibility crosswalks, pedestrian countdown signals, all of which are CDOT standard. And we're also evaluating where curb extensions could be provided to shorten that width of pedestrian walking within the vehicle travel way.
Okay, I'm seeing, this might be another redundant question or obvious question, but what happens to local businesses when they don't have enough customers living nearby to stay open?
I'd like to answer this from the perspective of actually the grocery store, neighborhood grocery store, and how important that is to this community. Unfortunately, there's a really bad fact pattern that's happened the last couple of years between Treasure Island electing to close and the Camberos family shutting down on Well Street. And then subsequently Plum Market, followed by Dom's recently closing both of those. So we have this very bad narrative of 3 separate grocery stores, non-national chains, but independent grocers closing in the neighborhood. That's one of the types of restaurants, but it's kind of under the same brush of there's an incredible amount of costs and expenses being pushed onto their business models, rent, real estate tax pass-throughs, payroll costs, insurance. And it's hard to survive in a city. And so grocers especially have some of the lowest profit margins of any retail business in the country. So the only thing we can do is, again, find ways to grow the economic base, bring in more disposable incomes into the neighborhood. Maybe this is a way to do that. Maybe there's other ways to do it too. But the result of kind of not supporting local businesses is, markets find they're like water. You can turn and shake the bowl, but water always finds level. And the capital markets are the same way. And the progression that you've seen of the bar nightlife scene, continuing to march up North Avenue and kind of maybe even leapfrog over, right? We know that that's something that probably this room is fighting against, is the progression of nightlife and bars and some of the late night issues that happen. They're progressing because they actually are very profitable business models, and there are huge profit margins in food and beverage and liquor sales, right? And so you have to figure out a way to grow the economic base and fill the neighborhood with people that support the types of businesses you want to see here. Versus, again, not filling that void, and the market finds a way to fill it by growing the most profitable business that's there, which is food and beverage. So that's, again, market dynamics, and we'd love to see Well Street and the commercial base as healthy as possible.
Okay, so 38 people are asking to have the question answered. Why is a mid-rise building not being considered?
Rhetorical question again, I believe. So. No, just kidding. It's a joke. Relax. So again, I'm not saying it's the wrong solution. I'm just saying compare what changes to the project and the benefits of breaking this project into multiple towers, right? If you look at the ability to accommodate an off-street circulation area for Ubers and Amazon delivery trucks and traffic of all that kind, it goes away under multiple towers. You don't have the site area to accommodate traffic on your site. Talk about curb cuts, loading docks. It's not one loading dock that's in sight. It's two loading docks. It's three loading docks. And it's just that, you know, congratulations to maybe the higher floor unit owners in the surrounding condo buildings that had, you know, 10, 15, 20 floors cut off the building. But you've done that to the direct detriment of your lower neighbors in your building, who now have two buildings that they have to look around instead of one. And so, again, we're not saying it's right or wrong, but it's just our opinion. No, your opinion is not right or wrong, and my opinion is not right or wrong. I'm just saying we differ in, again, the prioritization of what we're trying to do is be as democratic as possible in terms of the impact of the views of the neighbors. So that's.
Okay, the 36 people are asking, what will be done to increase the divvy bike capacity and stations in the area? Can anybody here answer that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
We do have a requirement of our building, and it's a citywide requirement. There, one-to-one parking is now required to be built. So for every residential unit, you have to provide for one bike parking within the building. So there's massive amounts of condo associations know this. There's massive bike rooms now that are being built in these buildings.
Okay, 36 people are asking, there are concerns around traffic and the plan focus on transit-oriented development and reduce the amount of parking.
So in regard to that one, as a parallel document to the traditional traffic impact study, CDOT is now incorporating what is called a travel demand management plan. This plan is a document designed to identify transit-oriented development, what existing pedestrian, bicycle, walking facilities exist, how these can be improved, what can be done in the development specifically to facilitate more travel that is not oriented around single occupancy vehicles. So that is all being looked at as part of our evaluation for the development.
Okay, so the next question, 37 people are asking Alderman Hopkins if he's in favor of the project or not.
Raise your hand if you've ever fulfilled your civic duty by serving on jury duty. Anybody? Okay, halfway through the trial, they would have asked you, what's your verdict? What would you have said, right? You would have been abdicating your duty if you had made your decision at that point. I wouldn't be wasting my time, and I wouldn't be wasting your time with now the 7th meeting like this if I had already made up my mind. I'm aware that this is a controversial decision. I'm aware that no matter what I do, yes or no, and eventually I'm going to have to pick one of those two options. There's no maybe, right? It's either yes or no. Somebody's going to be angry with me. Someone's going to think I made the wrong decision. So I get that. It's part of the job. But as I said earlier, I'm not going to rush to make that decision until we have all the information that we need to make the best decision possible for the city and for the neighborhood that I represent. That's why we're here tonight. And that's what this is about. We're not done yet, and I'm going to stay with this process, and I think many of you will too, until we are done. So when that moment arrives, I will make the announcement of my either support or opposition to this project. It will probably go out in my newsletter. We just actually completed a very similar community review process for a couple of other development proposals in this area, significantly smaller in scale than this one. And the announcement of the decision will be issued this week. So for those of you that were involved in those, you've seen the process, how it goes from the beginning, goes to the review, community meetings, input, dialogue, changes, conclusion, and then it goes to the city council zoning committee. You've seen that in these other two proposals that were before this neighborhood recently. So this one is the same, except for the volume and the scope of it. It's taking longer because it's more complicated, as it should. So I'm not going to artificially end this, and I'm not going to rush it, because when you rush it, you tend to get things wrong. So it's going to take as long as we need to get all the answers to make an informed decision.
Rather than answering questions online.
Yes.
If these are questions that people here are submitting and voting for.
One more question.
Okay, we'll do three more of the questions that people are submitting here, I'm told, and then we'll go to the live questions. So we'll do the three that are up at the top. 39 people are asking, how many more meetings about this desperately needed housing will there be?
I think the Alderman had answered that.
So 36 people are asking, why provide so many parking spaces, given the transportation in the area and the concerns over traffic? And it says this is a good project, but could be even better. So why so many parking spaces?
So I'll speak to the residential component. So the Moody Church is asking for 300 spaces to be built for their members. Separate from that, there's 150 parking spaces also in that same podium for the residential units. That's a 30% parking ratio. There are some buildings that are less, there are some buildings that are more. It's not an exact science. That's kind of where we landed at the moment. But again, that could change. It could be reduced, it could be increased. It also depends on the unit types that we're building. If we end up, committing to building larger units, 3 beds, 4 beds, those are more likely to be, households that have a car versus smaller units like studios and 1-bedrooms don't. So again, we haven't landed on a final count, but at the moment, we're kind of holding at that initial 30% ratio.
Okay, I'm going to make an executive decision that the question 35 people are voting for is really the same as that last question. So we're going to go to the one the 33 people are asking for. And this states that Fern Hill, this is our last question. Fern Hill has stated that they will redevelop the gas stations and get a grocery store on Treasure Island. They have been saying that since 2021. There is no guarantee that they will ever redevelop those parcels. They could put anything in there. They are not obligated. Can they please confirm this? Also, isn't it true that you have 6 years to reveal your plans?
So again, in front of hundreds of people and whoever's on the Zoom, right? We've been clear that the long-term plan for the gas stations is for them to be, basically, contributed or given to the Moody Church, and they will own those parcels. They will not be gas stations when the church owns those parcels.
Why do you say that?
Because I've just said it.
Why wouldn't they keep it? They don't have a lot of money.
Well, a nonprofit church is not going to step into the environmental or operational liability of a gas station. And I say that having purchased them and 3 months after had a mass shooting where 3 SUVs opened up on a party bus at 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's why a church doesn't own gas stations. It's exactly why. In terms of Treasure Island, so, again, we've carried that since 2019, completely vacant. We've never entertained any other use from any tenant other than a grocery store since that period. It has been an incredibly financially taxing and expensive hold period for us. It's not a free just option that we're sitting on these parcels. We have tried extremely hard to land and convince a grocery store to be here. We were in conversations with Dom's when they decided to go to the Plum Market space. We've had many conversations with other tenants. It's a bit of a Goldilocks syndrome. It's too big, it's too small, the ceilings are too high, the ceilings, the loading dock doesn't work this way, it needs to be reconfigured. So you will never hear anybody in the retail industry or any broker tell you that have ever had a conversation with me about pursuing any tenant other than a grocery store. It's a commitment we made to the alderman 5 years ago. And we continue, to hold and honor that commitment. So, no, there's no guarantees, but I think if you just look at how we've conducted ourselves and the fact that we haven't pursued or threatened to pursue any other use, you can judge us kind of by how we've acted on that space. And then the 6-year comment, I think that has to do with I assume the reference to a planned development sunsetting after 6 years. If not, I don't know what that 6 years is referring to. So once a project's approved, you technically have a 6-year window to start substantial construction. And then the city has the right to basically sunset the planned development and revert back to its original zoning. But I think that's probably what that 6 years was referencing.
Yeah, let me just follow up on the question of potentially DOMs locating in that spot. When we talked about that back when none of us in our wildest dreams thought DOMs would disappear as abruptly and as quickly as they did. Unfortunately, what happened there didn't have anything to do with the demand for a grocery store in this neighborhood, especially a grocery store that had the options and had the different things that DOMs offered, which made them unique. Both the one on Wells Street and the one at Diversity and Halsted were doing in excess of $500,000 of volume per week. That is remarkable for a store of that footprint. And it shows that the demand for a store like that exists right now today in this neighborhood. I don't know the reason DOMs closed, but I know it wasn't because of lack of demand. I know it wasn't because this neighborhood didn't support both of those stores and would support a similar store, similar in concept, in the footprint of the old Treasure Island. So that remains an option. And as Nick said, some type of grocery operation is non-negotiable. It is mandatory for the former Treasure Island space. And we're hoping that the operator will eventually emerge.
I will thank all of you. Thank you, Old Town Merchant and Residents Association and Zoning Committee, for the questions. And now we're going to the live questions. So thanks for your patience.
All right, before we get to the lottery numbers and start taking those questions and comments, first I'd like to call up Linda Conantz, president of 1660s Association. Is Linda still in the house? Come on up, Linda. The microphone is right here. My colleague David is standing there. Hello. I'm sorry. Yes, Linda is the president of Americana. We're also going to have the president of 1660 come up as well.
You all hear me? Okay. Well, thank you. This has been very interesting. I'm a little bit overwhelmed with all of the details and the comments and the questions and the complaints and the cheers and all of that. I prepared something to read that covers some of the things that have been brought up, and I'm just going to go ahead and read it, and you can accept it or not, however you feel. So thank you, Alderman Hopkins, for giving me this opportunity to represent Americana Towers. I would like to direct my comments to the traffic issues, which of course have come up quite a bit. Maybe I should turn around. Traffic issues that this community experiences every day at LaSalle Drive, North Avenue, and Wells Street, but are seemingly, although I take that back, they're not being dismissed by the developer. I can hear that the developer is very well aware of it. From my experience, there are times when it takes 1 to 2 red lights for cars to approach the intersection of LaSalle Drive and North Avenue to make the right turn. Where's the traffic information on how many cars can come off of Lakeshore Drive and travel onto LaSalle Drive to continue south or to make the right turn onto North Avenue? With the proposed location of the garage entrance at LaSalle Drive near the North Avenue corner, how long will the lines of waiting cars be and how many red lights will it take when 450 more cars are added to this intersection? We already have double right turners at the intersection. Are we going to have triple right turns? And will emergency vehicles be able to serve the area? We're waiting for the details to show us how these traffic concerns will be addressed. What kind of an obstacle course will be created on LaSalle Drive, North Avenue, and Wells Street with the delivery vehicles, the rideshare vehicles, scooters, bikes, pedestrians, and the buses? North Avenue is a major walking path east to the park or west to the Old Town commercial shopping areas, and always has a steady flow of pedestrian traffic, with even more on the weekends and holidays. How much worse will the street get when 500 to 600 more people come flowing out the front door that will be located on North Avenue, adding to the pedestrian crowds on the street? Will this development enhance the area, or will it exacerbate the traffic and density on the street because it's just too big? The developer has suggested the removal of paid public parking on the streets around the high rise to alleviate traffic congestion, but it will also affect residents and local businesses that need the parking for customers to get to their stores. How will local businesses in the area survive if the public can't easily get to their stores? They probably won't survive, and the customers will go to an easier neighborhood. What does the change of zoning really mean? It opens the potential for the area to be surrounded by more high-rise towers, adding even more density. Some have said more towers wouldn't be possible, but if this tower got this far, then it will very well could be possible. As you know, Old Town is a very special community that those of us who have lived here for many years want to protect the charm, the history, the village atmosphere, and its importance to the city of Chicago. We're not opposed to a development on the site, but it has to complement and enhance the street, as was done with the most recent additions to the North Avenue corridor. This 480-foot high-rise is out of character for the immediate area, overpowering the street with a level of density that is untenable for the community. We're opposed to a development of this enormous size that fills this block and will negatively impact already congested traffic density and the overall livability of the streets. So I'm asking again, how many red lights will it take to get through the LaSalle and North Avenue intersection if this high-rise tower moves forward?
Thank you, Linda. Next up, we have Steve Miserlin of 1660. I got the right one on this name. You should not interrupt, please. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alderman Hopkins. Thank you for having this meeting at such a critical time for our community and the future of Old Town. My name is Stephen Maserlian. I am an 18-year resident of the neighborhood and currently serve as board president of 1660 North LaSalle. 1660 Condo Association is in a unique position in that Fern Hill owns the former Treasure Island grocery store space, which is part of our condo association. Fern Hill claims that they have offered a collaborative community engagement process through public meetings and cups of coffee that have shaped their proposal to reimagine the North and LaSalle corridor. This is simply not true. Now, since the proposed development that was unveiled in September, after these years of supposed community engagement, Nick Anderson has been asked at least 8 times for more specifics about the development. Specifically, Nick has been asked to provide the following. The traffic study that has been submitted to this city, that's been refused. After indicating there was a partnership with a commissary, it was asked of Nick to provide more details about the partnership and any potential long-term partners, as it is important to the community that a long-term grocer be in that space. That's also been refused. Number 3, the plans with the gas stations. Nick had previously spoken about the advantages of closing the gas stations to improve traffic and safety. So we asked of Nick for further information on when those gas stations will be closing and what will be developed on those sites. That's also been refused. So every response to date has essentially been, let's have a coffee and talk about it. There's never any details, no transparency whatsoever. So while Fern Hill continues on with this charade of community engagement, I firmly believe Nick wants to smooth talk his way through the process and keep the community in the dark long enough to shove the development through. So now I'll move on to recent developments in Old Town. So I did some research and several developments have occurred in the area in recent years, none this big. I was doing some research on recent developments across North Avenue, and here are some facts. 1550 North Wheelan, built in 2017, 6 stories and 60 units. 633 West North Avenue, built in 2019, 11 stories, 261 units. 1552 North Park, built in 2019, 8 stories and 69 units. Almost done. 1550 North Clark, built in 2020, 10 stories, 32 units. And then 159 West North Avenue, built in 2021, 6 stories and 35 units. So with all these developments in recent years, now comes a 44-story, 480-foot, 500-unit tower proposal to be built in an already highly congested location with major traffic issues. Why can't the development mirror the size and scale of these other recent developments that I mentioned? Because is it not economically feasible for the developer? If that's the case, why is that our problem? Alderman Hopkins, you had previously said at a previous meeting that it's our job as residents to make a decision based on what we see, and if the Fern Hill proposal does make Old Town better. The current proposed development does not make Old Town better, and with Fern Hill's continued lack of transparency, how can the community support anything at this time? Thank you, Alderman Hopkins, for allowing me to speak.
Our next speaker is Kevin Vaughn.
Alderman, thank you for hosting tonight. We are very lucky to have you as our alderman. My family owns Corcoran's Grill and Pub at 1615 Norwells, and we also own 1617 Norwells. We share a 240-foot lot line with Walgreens and a 60-foot lot line with the Moody parking lot, and we have a parking, delivery, and garbage easement through the Moody lot. We've owned Corcoran's for 24 years. Yes, I'm that old. And it is a special place, and the building has a lot of history. However, what makes Corcoran special is Old Town. Old Town is a unique neighborhood filled with all kinds of people, young, old, rich, poor, students, professionals, and artists. Old Town is not the near north side, that's a critical point here, and it is not Lincoln Park. It is something in the middle. I live in Lincoln Park, and I work in Old Town. And in my personal opinion, Old Town is way better. I care deeply about Old Town. That's why I'm here. Old Town is historic, but by no means has it stood still. And we have had lots of development in the last 10 years, including many mid-sized buildings with up to 100, and even more I heard tonight, rental units. This is the type of building we should be talking about. I really don't understand why this needs to be 40+ stories and 400,000 square feet. On the Walgreens portion of the lot that is 88 by 228. and with an FAR of 11.01. It is simply way too big for the block and for Old Town. We should be asking, why does it have to be this big? Yes. Yes, this is a planned development, but at the core, it's a zoning change, a really big zoning change. And we are all here tonight, Alderman, to ask you to say no to such a big zoning change. In addition, there are no setbacks, and you've added some clarity about that tonight for me, but I still think on the residential portion above the Walgreens, from what I can tell, along North Avenue, there are no setbacks above the narrow sidewalk, which has lots of pedestrians, and ice and things falling out of operable windows will be an issue. Other towers in the neighborhoods, and this includes Americana, 1660, James Comer, they all have setbacks, drive by. They all have setbacks off the street for the residential portion, at least off the main streets, possibly not off the alleys. So so this setback issue, I think, and the size of the lot, the square peg and the round hole issue we're dealing here with the Walgreens portion of the lot, is another big reason why you need to say no. And of course, and we've talked endlessly about this tonight, this development will bring more traffic. First, the construction traffic, and I'm really scared about what that's going to do to the business community. With 2 years of endless cranes, semis, closed lane canopies, and flaggers, and then post-construction with move-in, Ubers, and parking lot traffic. In normal situations, absolutely, blocks and intersections adapt, but the corner of LaSalle and North Avenue are not normal. The traffic study must get presented to the community, and thank you for committing to that, Alderman. And if there's no miracle solution here, and I believe it's going to take a miracle solution if it's going to get done. If there's no miracle solution, Alderman, you must say no. Let me just close by saying, if the reason the project has to be so huge is for the developer return on investment, returns, just like views, are not guaranteed. This is simply way too big for Old Town and for the block. Thank you.
We will now begin the comment, question and answer lottery. I will call numbers. If you have that number, please feel free to come up to the microphone. And we are asking that each individual keep their comments to 3 minutes in the interest of hearing from as many people as possible. Our first number is 435. 435, please come up. Hi. Yeah, sorry.
Hi, Nick. Nick's an old neighbor of mine, 1660, lived right on our floor. Nick and I are former bankers. Okay, Nick and I are former neighbors. We lived at, I live at 1660. Nick was right down the hallway. We're former bankers. Nick worked at Bank of America. I worked at JP Morgan. We both worked in real estate. Nick's done a lot of business in the city, doing workouts on some of the super tall condominiums. He'd be applauded for that. But here he's tried to squeeze too much onto too small of a site. And I know Nick is probably somewhat of an architect in his approach, but this is a 3/4 scale building on a site that just doesn't work. The building won't work. It's good. It's less than 10,000 square feet of floor plate for 500 units. I served on the condo board. I know about plumbing systems and window units and everything else that it takes to run a building. This is a disaster if you build a 44-story building. So I really encourage Nick to go back to the drawing board. A lot of us have backgrounds in drafting and finance, and even the people on the planning commission. I think Alderman Burnett, who supported much of the development in our neighborhood, has a degree in drafting. So ask him, please, take a look at your drawing board and figure out that this is not a good deal for the city. I went through a couple quick things. Basically, the floor area ratio, it's 2.3 currently. It steps up to 5. Some of it should seriously challenge that. This means that 200,000 square feet of assembled land supports 1 million square feet of construction. It takes 3 to 5 years to put that construction in place. I get it that the tower cranes have disappeared. So has crime increased in the west and south side. We gotta solve those problems. And then the construction cranes will come back. And there's a lot of lenders that'll put money in the city of Chicago, but it doesn't all have to be in Old Town. Finally, I know about debt bailouts and workouts. I did that for 12 years. You know, when someone comes into town and starts throwing money around and spends $5 million on each of the gas stations, and then refinances it and puts $6 million of debt on each of the gas stations, and then buys a Treasure Island for $15 million and puts $8 million of debt with Northwestern Mutual Life, which has financed a lot of these big projects, you know there's big money involved. So let's put that big money to work in the city of Chicago. We care about housing for our people. We have family members that participate in affordable housing. For God's sakes, we're not against affordable housing. We get it. And we have young people coming through colleges with engineering degrees. They got to put their skills to work. So let's pull together and make something that works for everyone. Let's get this city back on track.
Thank you. I'm going to call 3 numbers just so the next 2 people will get ready to move along a little faster here. Let's go with 490, followed by 502, followed by 442. Everybody? My name's Jack and I'm actually with, signs down, please.
I'm moving it off to the side. I can't.
If we could please put the signs down. Who would like to see the speaker? We've all seen what the signs say. Please put them down. Thank you. Go ahead, speaker. Everybody.
I'm actually with one of the organizations that is very pro-housing here in the city. And I know that there are a lot of concerns, especially around the traffic. It sounds like there are people that are trying to resolve that. But I do want you all to take a macro view on this. People are not moving to Chicago. They're moving to Houston. They're moving to Atlanta. They're moving to Phoenix. They're not choosing our beloved city, and crime certainly has stuff to do with it. But when you ask people, one of the primary drivers for their move, the answer is consistently the cost of living. And that's why Texas is eating our lunch right now.
Folks, please, excuse me, please. Interrupting is not going to help.
Be civil. I'm just saying, I am so pro-Chicago. My family's been here 120 years. Yes, one of the reasons my great-grandfather came here was because we were building those bungalows on the northwest side at a rapid clip. And he, who didn't have a penny at the time, could afford to live there. And I want other people around this country and in the Chicagoland area to be able to move back into this city. Because, you know, there are 2 facts that I like about this town, right? Yeah, the crime is one, but we share something in common with West Virginia in that Illinois is losing people. And they're going south. They're going. Okay, we know why. So any opportunity to build more capacity and bring the cost of rents down, to bring the cost of mortgages down, is something that we all should embrace. Because I, Alderman Hopkins, and a lot of you in this room just want the city of Chicago to be great again. So there it is.
Was our next speaker in the house still? Please step on up.
Oh, hi, my name's Janie, and I'd like to first say thank you, Alderman Hopkins, for having this meeting. I worked with Alderman Hopkins on another property I have with pickleball, and I bring that up because I thought the alderman was very fair. And I think at the Chamber of Commerce meeting, you made a statement that it's something you're most proud of because you worked in collaboration with all of the neighbors, with the developer, and your office was an intermediary area, and it worked wonderful. And I thank you for that. However, with the Fern Hill development, I have to say, I know there's a lot on your shoulders. However, you said there's 7 meetings. I've gone to every one there's been. And where it's getting really frustrating for us in Old Town is that for the majority, except for the one you hosted in January where people had 2 minutes, Nick is given the floor. He gets to control the meeting. He gets to orchestrate the content. He picks what questions. We don't get to see the questions because most are on Zoom. And he answers what questions he wants to. When there was the meeting in, I think it was March, I did pose a question, which you took, and I had said that there was a lack of community engagement. And what Nick repeated was, thank you, Jamie C., for your comment on community engagement. He twisted that, that's what you said, and you said, okay, let's go to the next question. There has not been community engagement. He has been talking about this since September 2021. Alderman, I remember you said we're going to do this differently. We're going to collaborate with the community and go to engage Fern Hill. There'll be updates there. You can put your comments. That site is run by Nick Anderson, co-urbanized. He controls and co-urbanized moderates what's on there. For that to be our forum that he cites, that he has 6,000 followers and he's checking off boxes so he can go to City Hall. He can say he's had coffees, he can do all this stuff, but he is not talking to us at all. What he did in September of 2023 is the first time he mentioned the tower, September of 2023. And that was the first. It's like the elephant in the room. He talks about the gas stations, he talks about everything else. And then in March is when he says he's working with us, but what do? Instead of having 395 feet, you go to 480 feet. You're not cutting down on those condos. You want 500. You said at another meeting, you're unwilling to work with us. It's 500. This is just too big, too dense for that particular parcel. It was down zone for a reason. I feel, the community feels like you're hijacking Old Town. Please, Alderman Hopkins, have a meeting with us without the developer like you did. I know you're going to be fair, but we have got to talk and you've got to work with us. I am imploring you. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Alderman Hopkins, for letting us speak, and hi to everybody else. My name is Diane Gonzalez, a long-term resident of Old Town. I think what I can add tonight is only a little bit of the history of how some of us old timers got here tonight. We fought urban renewal in the 60s. If not, we would have been another Sandburg village. We fought and we won. We saved some things from being demolished, and that led to a historic district. Became a local landmark district in 1977. 1984, we got on the National Register of Historic Places. Lots and lots of work, hundreds of meetings, thousands of hours of research. And then after that, we worked in 1989 or so. Alderman Chuck Bernardini got us downzoned. Never did I think in my life, I've been here 50 years, I'll mention that in a minute. Never did I think we'd be here tonight talking about upzoning, or whatever you want to call it. We fought this, and that's why we fought it, to get what we have today. And we don't want to give it up. I understand biking and housing, sure, let's all ride our bikes from here to eternity. How can anyone not be against? How can anyone not be for? I'll wave my sign too. Affordable housing is very important. But this issue, we're talking about Walgreens, we're talking about a parking lot, we're talking about 40-some stories. That's not what we work for. I'm speaking for myself tonight as a long-term preservationist. I'm also speaking for Ward Miller. Executive Director of Preservation Chicago. I'm on his board. He was unable to be here tonight. We are asking you not to develop. You have absolutely right. And I know that parking lot is not very popular with us either, but to go as high as you're going and as dense as you're going is not something that we support. So thank you. Please go back to the drawing board, as everybody's saying, make us something more palatable. We'll be with you. Thank you.
Our next speaker is number 454. Followed by, for preparation purposes, 433 and 430.
I first have a question for you, and then I have comments. My question is, we talk about affordable housing. I support affordable housing. But when you put together your business plan, you had to make some assumptions on what the rents were going to be. Can you be transparent with us tonight and tell us what those rents are going to be so we can evaluate for ourselves if we think that's affordable housing?
For the 20%.
No, I'm talking.
Or the other 80%?
Yes.
So the 80% are market rate, so whatever the market would bear, right? There isn't a limit on the rent, right? In the presentation, I showed the average new construction market rate rent in Gold Coast and Old Town as of the first quarter is now eclipsing almost 3,500 per unit. That's the market today. So again, that's the 80% that would not be market rate or would not be affordable would be, again, whatever the market would bear.
Okay.
And then the 20% that is designated affordable, those rents are limited to families that make up to 60% of the AMI, area median income. That in Chicago is roughly a $48,000 a year salary. So if you spend 30% of your income on rent, it breaks down to about $1,000 a month, plus or minus, as opposed to $3,500 a month. And that's the difference between market rate and affordable.
All right, moving on. I gotta, as others have said, the density and height of this building is not in line with the character of the neighborhood. Our historical leaders saw a need to preserve Old Town and put appropriate zoning in place, just like Burnham saw a need to preserve the lakefront. I live east of Clark in the Gold Coast, and the impact on traffic is going to be extremely problematic. The way that you have the lobby on North Avenue, rideshare deliveries and the like will stop in front of the building. You've said you can't help what people do. Okay, I get that, but it's going to create problems. And then this crazy way that people have to access the building if they're coming north on LaSalle. If you approach North Avenue from the south, cars will turn west on North Avenue, north on Wells, east on Eugenie, and south on LaSalle, and people turning in and out of that turnabout area. It's going just to create more traffic issues. They're doing nothing but creating more problems for this neighborhood. And, I'd like to see something that is less dense, as other people have said. And you say you're transparent, but you just keep on moving the pieces of the puzzle around to keep the 500 units. Something has got to change, and you've got to take our concerns into account with this development.
Thank you. Next speaker. And the next speaker was, I believe, 433. Is 433 still here? Oh, my apologies.
I'm 430.
Quick question on the affordable housing units. What is the breakdown of how much of those are studios, one bedroom, two bedroom, actually oriented towards family family development.
So, City of Chicago housing policy, the affordable units in the building have to mirror exactly the unit mix of the entire building. You can't push the affordable units into the.
So how many studios?
We haven't set our exact unit mix. The maximum efficiency or studio units that are allowed in the zoning district we've applied for is 30%. So there will be no more than 30% studios.
Okay.
Could be less, but no more.
Okay, and then the other question is, when the Chicago Department of Transportation is considering and looking at traffic studying, are they also considering, there's a large, I think, 400 unit development at North and Clybourne? And then there's also JDL and Moody School is putting another like 2,500 units down on South on Wells. Do they, when they're looking at the traffic study, do they take all those other buildings into account?
The Alderman doesn't have a mic. He answered yes.
And so then, I'll go back to, since I've got a moment here. So how many of the affordable housing, how many are like 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom for actual families? Yes. Or,
We haven't set the unit mix yet. Again, then this could change, but I would expect maybe, 5 to 10% would be 3 bedrooms in the building and maybe roughly around 20% would be 2 bedrooms.
okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call the next 3 speakers. 227, followed by 274, followed by 462. Thank you. Come on up, please.
Alderman Hopkins, thank you for this meeting. There's a lot that's been said tonight. And I just want to say that this is a great community. And we believe in responsible development. And we want responsible development. We want housing for all. We want all of this. But this feels like it's irresponsible development. And I have to say to Alderman Hopkins, this has not been a collaborative effort for the community. We have just found out in the last 6 or 7 months the true full plan development. There's been a lot of talk over the last couple of years about grocery stores and other kind of, what does the facade look like? And I wish that at the very beginning, 2 years ago, that we did learn about what the whole plan development was, because we would have all saved a lot of time. It feels like this has been a large PR campaign from the developer side. And I appreciate that, because that's what developers do. And so you seem like a nice guy, Nick, but, please, this is not going to solve Chicago's problems, and it's not going to solve Chicago's housing problems. It's not going to take care of the crime or why people are leaving. And I also want to say, Alderman Hopkins, you're our voice. You're all that we have, because otherwise we're powerless. We don't have a large investor group behind us. We don't have the power that Nick and his investors have. We just have you. And I have to say, my property taxes have gone up 104% over the last 7 years. I do not think this unit or this building is going to solve that problem for me. And does anyone else believe that their taxes are going down after this is done? So thank you.
Next speaker.
I'm not very good at any of this. But is there any way, oh, I'm sorry, is that better? Is there any way to look up the effects of water and sewer after this is built and what it's going to do to our pipes and demand? Is that available anywhere?
Yeah, that's actually the standard engineering function for the Department of Water Management. It's part of the permitting. So we wouldn't necessarily do that now as part of the proposal, but before construction is allowed and before permitting would be granted, they would have to do that engineering study, its impact on sewers and drainage and things like that.
But would we be able to see a copy of it?
Sure, I don't see why not. It's a public document and we could get it for you. Yeah.
And thank you for hearing us out. I believe this is a monstrosity. It's way too dense. Not that I'm oh, sorry. Not that I'm against housing. I agree with needing affordable housing, but I would like to see the crime and the distress of the city be cleared up before we go for something this huge. That's all.
Thank you.
Next speaker. Yep, we're still waiting on one that I called before, so. There he is. I'll call 3 more in a minute.
Oh, well.
I invest in real estate projects also, and I'm curious what your. I invest in real estate projects also, and I'm curious what your internal rate of return is, and for what period of time you made that estimate.
So typically, in real estate, we try to build to a 6% return on total project costs. That's somewhat of an industry standard. That's a little bit up in the air right now with the rapid increase in interest rates. But again, long-term, that's typically, 6% has been for a long time a benchmark for Chicago.
6% of total costs, but your equity is not equal to the total cost. Your equity is going to be much less than total. So what does that work out to your return on your equity?
I'm going to give you, it depends, and not to dodge your question, but it depends on your rent projections.
Yeah,
Depends.
exactly. You made those
Costs.
projections, right?
They're just internal projections.
Sure.
It doesn't,
What-
doesn't mean my projections are right or wrong.
What's that number?
Goal is 6%.
That's only on the total. What's your return on your equity?
To my capital partners in the future.
Right, your capital partners.
You know, you're typically trying to get to a mid-teens return for an institutional equity investor.
Okay.
Like a pension fund, insurance company, life insurance company,
15%.
typically.
We're good. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we have 268, followed by 259, followed by 256. Two, 6, 8, are we still here? Oh, great.
Just for the record, I just want to say, I don't have much to say on this project right now because I know there's going to be another community meeting. So just for the start, I do support this project. For the alderman, I've heard a lot of people around the area and the tall ability to complain. So is there any way to get demolition permits for 1660 North and South? In Village House, because they're 40 stories and they all have 500 units. So I mean, if this is out of context, so is this, so is that. So I mean, the Eugene Terrace building, wasn't it? But I have the floor.
Please don't interrupt.
I have the floor. I have the floor. I have the floor. Don't talk to me. So, Eugene Terrace actually has, more than 500 units in that building. So this one is about equal to that. This is equal to all these other 3 buildings that we talked about, the tall ones. In terms of the historic district, well, this is not a historic district. This is outside of the historic district. It's a parking lot. The historic district is already protected. So I don't see why people who live in 50-story buildings or 40-story buildings that are 50 years old are complaining about this one. But in terms of the building itself, I do like the architecture. It has changed, it has evolved. Now I'll wait for the next meeting to have more comments, but thank you, Alderman, for the time.
Go ahead, sir.
Hey, my name's Michael. I moved here in 2015. And for a long time when I moved here, I actually lived inside of a big tower like this downtown. When I did that, it gave me the ability to get rid of my car. And I originally came here with a car and I found I was not using it. And I thought, wow, I could save a lot of money by not having this. So I got rid of it. And so I'm not causing any traffic. I'm also now a property owner and I pay property taxes. Like other people who have commented, when I moved, like it's gone up by quite a bit. So I have a long future ahead in this city where I'm going to be paying a lot of property taxes over my lifetime. I am in full support of build as many towers like this as you can across the city to keep that burden low for me as I raise a family in this city. So you said that the projection's like 2.5 million. We know that when people move in, they're gonna pay more. They're gonna pay sales tax, they're gonna pay all kinds of other taxes. I just hope that the alderman is taking all of that into account as you're making this decision. So don't really have a question, just a comment, but I'm in full support. Thank you.
Alderman Hopkins, thank you for hosting this meeting to listen to the community. My name is Sneha and I'm a condo owner and resident at Americana Towers. I am deeply concerned about the size of Fern Hill's proposal. 500 units is just too large for that intersection. You have mentioned in the past, and in a past meeting, that we live in a capitalistic society and the developer is motivated by profit, which is true. I understand that there has to be a financial incentive for the developer, but I find it hard to believe that Fern Hill would not make a sizable profit from a mid-rise building. This leads me to several questions. Why can't a mid-rise be built instead? Why hasn't the developer taken into consideration feedback from the community about the size of the proposed development? I don't oppose development, but I want it to be done responsibly. There should be a balance between profit and maintaining the quality of life for the people in the neighborhood. Fern Hill can go anywhere else and make a massive profit, but we cannot go elsewhere. This is our home. Please, Alderman Hopkins, I implore you to say no to this development as it stands now and protect the quality of life and health of Old Town residents. Thank you.
Four seven two, followed by 463, followed by 620.
Can you hear me? Yes. First of all, I really enjoy being here. I enjoy seeing. Oh, I enjoy being here and seeing my neighbors. And even some of you, I know some of you personally, and some of you I just recognize from the neighborhood. And I'd like to actually start what I have to say with a little piece from Joni Mitchell, who said, "You don't know what you've got till it's gone." And I think that this is a perfect example. We have a neighborhood where we know each other. A few weeks ago, I was walking my dog down the street, and there were two people on bicycles driving down the street. And one of them said to the other, "Would you even know you were in Chicago if I didn't tell you, where you are? Can you believe that we have a neighborhood like this?" Sir, you have presented yourself very well. You're a very, very good talker. And I really appreciate that. You've given very little information, but you've been very smooth. And I think that's really, no, I mean, I have complete respect for you. From what I understand, Fern Hill has never developed anything as a company yet, number one. And number two, there is absolutely no prohibition against Fern Hill selling, assigning, or doing whatever they want with their contracts because it's your property to do what you want with. So any commitments you make that are not in writing and approved have no meaning to us because as you admit, this is part of the business world. So what I would say is that please respect this neighborhood. This is not the kind of development in terms of the scope. Nobody is saying that it shouldn't be developed and nobody is saying you shouldn't make a profit. But maybe 15% is a little rich, number one, and maybe you need to scale down so that you don't completely infuriate and delay your return on this investment. And finally, in terms of the grocery store, it's my understanding that there's no commitments yet from any grocery store. Plum Market was on Wells Street before they were sort of booted out because of Dom's Market. And Plum Market wanted to stay there, according to the Tribune and according to Plum Market. And of course, we all miss Treasure Island. I've been in this neighborhood for 50 years and we've been in the same house, raised our kids in this neighborhood. We don't want to see irresponsible development. So I think you can hear from what everybody is saying. We don't like the scope of the project and we don't like all of the unknowns. And I don't feel that there's any more information tonight than that we had yesterday or the day before. Thank you.
Okay, I think I don't see anybody jumping for that one. So the following speaker.
60, the last one?
Yep.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. This is overwhelming being in here, I'm not gonna lie. Joni Mitchell was talking about paving over paradise with the parking lot, by the way, for the record. Out there. My name is Jordan Gold. I'm 31. I live and work in Chicago full time, and I love this city. I'm a millennial, so laugh, whatever you feel. But my generation now makes up the largest share of the U.S. population and workforce, followed by Gen Z. We're becoming the backbone of the U.S. economy and U.S. cities. We fought through perpetual hardship, recession, a pandemic, skyrocketing cost of living, a looming climate crisis, and now an ever more constrained housing supply. Even when society continues to rob us of economic opportunity, we persist. I'm here today to support the housing addition to the second ward. Housing built anywhere in Chicago affects the housing market everywhere in Chicago. The current use of the land in question is grossly underutilized, being a single-story retail space and a parking lot. So that's something to consider. Building in this neighborhood will simultaneously provide homes for working citizens like myself while creating a larger tax base, grow the local economy, and inadvertently help stabilize the housing market across the city. Okay, my rent has shot up exponentially every year. Okay, these are things Chicagoans are actively dealing with, but my income has not done the same. So these are problems we're all facing. I continue to see neighborhood associations across Chicago prevent the growth we need to sustain as a city. These groups are thinly veiled as neighborhood stakeholders, but in actuality, they hijack the voices of other Chicagoans in an effort to protect self-interest. But do understand these groups do not represent the majority of current and future constituents. 57% of Old Town residents are under 40 years old, and 62% of Old Town residents are renters. Growth should not be a debate. Housing should not be a debate. Traffic has come up as a concern for development. Congestion can only be mitigated by investing in public transit and getting people out of cars, into trains, into buses, into bikes. The failures of our DOTs should not be dictating the future of our housing. We should not allow that to propagate a housing crisis. Being just a 0.3 mile walk to the Sedgwick Brown line, the building would be served by the L and multiple bus lines. According to a survey I found by Zipcar, 51% of millennials and 45% of Gen Zers don't want to live with a car. They do not want to have that liability in their lives. We can and should support.
Oh, you left a lot.
Excuse me, please. We can and should support these lifestyles through transit-oriented development. We're polluting our streets, our city, our lungs. Our children have asthma. We cannot just get in a car everywhere. Okay, and thank you. I know I'm over time, but please say yes to this. The city needs more of this. Thank you very much.
474, followed by, see what my random number generator spits out. 468, followed by 459. Is 474 still in the house? Oh, go ahead, thank you. The microphone close to your mouth and speak up.
I found it interesting that a couple of months ago, the Chicago Department of Planning sent out a notice that the 2024, see how it went, 2024 Historic Expo was open to the city of Chicago, and they were encouraging all Chicago residents to protect all of the Chicago historic sites, to work to protect them. I'm sorry, I'm not a speaker. I'm going to try to get through this and bear with me. And it coming from the Department of Planning, encouraging all of Chicago residents where they can to preserve and protect all of Chicago's historic features. And here it's coming at the same time that we're being faced with just the opposite of what the Department of Planning is encouraging Chicagoans to do. It would be a complete demolition of our historic gateway to Old Town and Old Town Triangle, to a devastation of a village that has survived all these past years. As a speaker from Old Town Triangle earlier had indicated, they have been working vigilantly over the years to preserve and protect that very essence of Chicago's history. And we shouldn't forget about the years that enveloped their efforts, the integrity, the prudent shepherding of the aldermen who preceded our current aldermen, working toward that end to see that we would have a village that was special. We have people coming from all around, coming to our Old Town Triangle because it's different. It's wonderful. We have everything here. We are already a balanced community. We are already a vibrant community. I understand that we have thousands, over 1,000 affordable housing units that are surrounding our Old Town. I say that we keep it, that we continue it, that we have a alteration. And what's worrisome is we haven't discussed all the other towers. Think about the O'Brien Tower that is going to be built. Think about the potential for the tower that's going to go up at Clybourne and North Avenue. Think about Lincoln Yards is going to be bringing a tower in. Think about the potential mandatory process that will be involved in this new PUD that will allow more towers that generate more traffic, that will be a quagmire that no Department of Transportation study can change ever for the rest of our lives.
Including remarks, please. Thank you. Thank you for your. Oh, it's hard to tell now if it's the next speaker or people getting up to leave. Okay, I don't see somebody making their way up, so if I called you before and you haven't come up, come up. I'm gonna call next one. 459. I don't see anybody moving on 459. Oh, there we go.
Thank you. First question is for the people that are for the development. Who's in favor? Yes. Okay, thanks. Do any of you live in Old Town? You do? Okay. I just asked. No, right or wrong. I just was curious. Alderman, thank you for having us. I do have another question for you. I know you didn't say you had a stance, yes or no, the jury duty question. So I won't ask if you're leaning one way or the other, but you do see the word "we" a lot in this. And it just sounds like "we" is with Nick, personally, to me. I don't know about anybody else, but you do say "we," all that. So I have a question, and this is an honest question. If this property is built, when it is built, because it's gonna be built, we agree that you can and should, just how high is, I guess, is where we're kind of going, right? Do you get any financial money to you personally if this is built? Next question. I'm just curious. No personal. I'm asking a question. Does he get money? Is that a personal? No, is he part of this investment?
The answer is no.
Okay, thank you. And Nick, thank you. I know you've been doing a lot. You're here, presented well, and obviously you have the business. So thank you, and a former Old Town resident that you are, or still, appreciate it. It sounds like that we all agree, or not all of us, but we agree that we want you to construct and do your project. We're all for that. What we're just asking for you is, rather than to go higher, is to go lower, right? And Alderman as well, just to take that in consideration. Is we understand there's capitalism, but this can benefit a lot of people and jobs. It's just, we're asking you to just build lower, and maybe we can all be a winner that way. And then everybody gets the new building, there'll be the affordable housing. I think everybody wins if it just goes lower. I don't know how much, but that's my final thought. Thank you.
463, 463. Four, 4, 5. We're gonna keep going random to keep this fair. 514. 508. 514, come on up, followed by 508.
Hi, my name is Dave, and I live in the Old Town Triangle. This is a question for the alderman. You're not my alderman, Timmy is. And I just wondered, are you having talks with Timmy? Because I think that people who live in the triangle are probably going to be more affected by this than people who are actually in your ward. And so I'm just curious, is there a way for us to share information with Timmy and it'll get with you? Are you scheduling any type of, I don't know, powwows on this project?
Yeah, Alderman Knudsen and I are in fairly regular conversation. You know, the uniqueness of the geography of my ward means that everything that I do in my ward affects the neighboring ward, right? Because of the way the borders are shaped. So clearly, I have my colleagues that I have good relationships with and I work with them. I defer to them on decisions that they have to make in their wards, even when it affects me, but that isn't to say I'm not part of that process. And the same is true in reverse in a situation like this. So I'm in conversation with Alderman Knudsen, Alderman Riley, Alderman Burnett. They're very aware of it, but they're allowing me to lead this process. They're waiting for me to make a decision before they weigh in one way or another. But they're very much monitoring this and watching it closely, and they're getting your calls and emails. And they know that this has a significant impact on the 43rd.
Is Alderman Knudsen here tonight? All right. Thank you.
If he's not here and no one from his staff is here, I'm sure they've been watching on Zoom. I have no doubt about that. They're monitoring this closely.
Next up was 508. That'll be followed by 477. 465.
Hi, my name is John Bosch-Chanchich. I'm a 35-year resident and owner in the Old Town Triangle. I live about a block from the proposed development. I've been involved in community matters for a while. I represented the community in lawsuits against that were filed by Tequila Roadhouse when the community voted Tequila Roadhouse, the precinct dry. And I was involved in two laws. I represented the community pro bono in two lawsuits and an appeal that resulted in our closing down that bar, which was a nuisance in the community. I'm opposed to a dense high-rise on North Avenue. And I think that's not just limited to the Walgreens, but I think this opens up the Piper's Alley, which I'm told that the owners of Piper's Alley have for years wanted to build a high-rise there. And that would shortly follow, I think, if this project was approved. But let me review a little bit of history of the community. In the 70s, Eugenie Terrace, the high-rise was built. And the community went to Alderman Bernardini and said, we don't want any more high-rises in this area. And the property, the Walgreens property, was downzoned to not allow high-rises. Now, Nick did not answer the question of how high you could build on the Walgreens property on North Avenue. You answered for Piper's Alley, and you answered for what the zoning was for the Moody Church, but you didn't answer for the Walgreens on North Avenue. But the property at Walgreens was downzoned not to allow high rises, and that's been in effect since the 1970s. Now, in the 80s, there was a proposal for a mid-rise condo development at Eugenie and Wells on the southeast corner. There was a meeting at the Old Town Triangle that I attended, and it was with Alderman Eisendrath, who was the 43rd Ward Alderman, which was where the building was located at that time. And it was clear that the community was very opposed to that project. And so Alderman Eisendrath, I assume, went to the property owner and the developer and told them that he could not support the project because of community opposition. And very soon the project was dropped because of it. I think that Alderman Eisendrath recognized at that time that the main input was from the residents around the development. And that's what I would say to you, Alderman Hopkins, is that we in the community are the ones who stand to lose the most from this development. You ought to be paying a lot of attention to what we say. In this case, Fern Hill knew full well that the Walgreens property wasn't zoned for a high rise when they bought it or when they reached their deal with Walgreens. So I don't think it's any problem for them. They are sent to go and make their fortunes elsewhere. But this proposed property is out of character with Old Town. Now, I would also say that Alderman Hopkins, when you were asked what your opinion was on this project, you used an analogy to litigation. Would you stop a trial in the middle without getting input? There is in litigation another route, and that's a summary judgment route. When you see that the community, that should be your most important input. And my question to you is, what are you going to use to decide whether the community input is more important, or whether this development for the city of Chicago is more important?
Yeah, that's a valid question. I have to give weight to all modalities of input in a process like this, including the community voice in meetings like this, the community voice that manages to find me outside of meetings like this. And that's an ongoing process. I get email all the time, don't I, Jordan, from, petitions, the whole thing. So that's one important element of this process that I take into consideration. The other is to try to be objective and, as I said earlier, strike a balance between the collective needs of the city of Chicago, as I represent 150 of it, that one alderman and, in a collective body of 50, with the specific needs of this neighborhood. And they're not always congruent. Sometimes there's a conflict between those two needs, and that's apparent in the voices that you're hearing tonight. Not every one of the supporters happens to be from outside of the second ward. I know for a fact a number of them are. They sought me out and they sought my office as well. So there's a divergence of local opinion that I have to give weight to. But if it were as simple as doing some kind of a popularity poll, you really wouldn't need an alderman, right? You could just take every controversial issue and put it to a popular vote and see what happens. This process requires more diligence, more thought, and more analysis than something like that. So I view my role as the steward of a community process is to take all of that into consideration, not predetermine it, not prejudge it, not grant a motion for summary judgment before all the evidence is in. And clearly, all the evidence is not in. As I mentioned earlier, I'm trying to leverage this proposal to get something for this neighborhood. And I think it's something that we all need. And that's probably the one thing most people agreed on, when we talked about it tonight, would be the benefits that we could have by a better traffic management plan to provide safer crossings of Clark Street, better bike lane, all of those things, right? We need that. And if we can use this to get that, that's a success that comes from this process that you could never get by simply putting it to a popular vote. So I'm ready to make a decision when the time comes, and you'll all be informed of it. Not only will you be informed of what my decision is, but you'll have the full rationale behind it, and then you can judge for yourself if I did the right thing or not.
Well, I think that the community, the Old Town Triangle Association, the Old
Including remarks, please.
Association did a survey, and 84% of their members are opposed to this project. And I think that they are saying that they don't care how much more tax revenue is brought by this building. They are property owners paying taxes in the city, and they don't care about the property thing. They think that this project will demean the Old Town neighborhood. And none of the buildings that have been put up in south of.
Sir, I don't want to have to mute the mic, please. You are well over 3 minutes, please. Thank you so much. 465, I believe, is the next one. Yep.
My name is Deborah DiMaggio, and I've had a front row seat in Old Town and also in the Loop. So I've lived in Old Town since the mid-80s, and I've had my law office at 161 North Clark since 1998. So we saw the Clark and Wacker project. We saw Block 57. There's no guarantee, even if this gets approved, that this developer, and with all due respect, we don't see a track record. And what you worked on in your prior firm, it was a ghost town. Block 57 was a nightmare, and then Clark and Wacker took forever. So we don't know that that won't happen here. And we need to look at actions, not words. And we've talked about collaboration. So I have an idea. Instead of having these meetings and we're opposing each other, and frankly, I'm not sure where the supporters are coming from, because there isn't one person I've talked to in the neighborhood who supports this project, not one. So I don't know where they're coming from. Okay, so here's my idea. Why don't we really work together where you share your projections with us? We're talking about a low rise. And right away you said 3 towers. No, 1 tower. Lee Golub is a famous developer in town, and he built at Clark and North. And I know personally he wanted a higher tower, and he settled, and he didn't have a higher tower, and it's a beautiful building. And I watched it being built. It's a beautiful building and it fits in. And that is manageable. And if you would really work with us, not just say it, but really work with us. We have a great community here. We have a lot of contacts. Instead of quantity, let's build quality and get 1 low rise, and you have your 1 unit, keep traffic down, keep density down. We'll help you fill the retail space. We have so many connections. We know so many people. We will truly work with you. We won't just say it. We will work with you. And hopefully you'll turn a profit. Okay? But it won't necessarily be what you meant it to be. We will work with you to make it a success, because it's our neighborhood and we care about it and we care what happens to it. And we don't want the aldermen to have a tough decision. It shouldn't be a tough decision. We should truly work together. And if you would commit to that, I know that our board president would meet with you, almost like the Americana Tower president, and every single person that spoke here tonight in opposing it, I was so impressed with how eloquent and prepared each one was, each person. So work with us, meet with us, open your email list to us, and don't just say it, let's do it together. So a low rise, 8 to 10 floors, one tower. How about it?
That concludes our time. We do have to move along because the building is closing. Alderman Hopkins, would you like to make any concluding remarks? That's pretty simple. Your number was not called and we're out of time, sir.
Yeah, we did get to most of them, and that was the best we could do in terms of fairness. I would stay till 10 o'clock tonight if Latin allowed, but unfortunately they don't, so we're out of time. But I do want to thank everyone for your participation. As the previous speaker just alluded to, the comments and the questions were outstanding. People came prepared. People were mostly respectful. A couple times, maybe not so much, but we got through it. And when passions run high and opinions, clash, that's to be expected. This is a democracy. It isn't always pretty. So I appreciate the fact that people care enough to be here and to tell me what you think. And taking all of this into consideration, as I said, the process is ongoing. Stand by for the announcement of the traffic mitigation and safety plan. When we get it, we will convene this meeting once again, and we'll continue taking your input. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you soon.